Put one on the other day. I didn't know what it was. I inherited it from a gentleman that sadly passed away. It's a Aurea rhododendron.
Oh, yes.
And this one is unnamed, and there are only 2 in the world in cultivation. One in Sydney Botanical Gardens, one in my greenhouse. And this one is just, it's a new one for me this year. It's the fuzzy Bolivian sage. And the flowers...
I love these. Look at them.
Oh, they're stunning. And
they look as if they're made of velvet almost, don't they?
They look like velvet, they look like little hats. When you do a close-up, it looks like a tongue. It looks like the Rolling Stones album cover.
Hello and welcome to episode 61 of Talking Dirty. Over at East Ruston Old Vicarage, looking a little bit like he's covered in plants, like he's a whole herbaceous border, is Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and very handsome horticulturalist.
And over in Cambridgeshire, on the sunny side of the street, we have Thordis Maria Sophia Fredriksson. And you're looking absolutely delightful. I noticed that our guest has plants in the background somewhere. I just saw something waving across the screen. You have plants in the background. I'm sitting here with plants on my curtains, but that's all.
Plants on the upholstery, plants on the clothes. We need to get some more house plants into shop, Mr. Gray. But we've got lots of really beautiful show and tell with this week's guest. We are super excited to invite Danish gardener extraordinaire, master of Instagram and YouTube, and his wonderful plot in Denmark. It is Claus Dalby. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for your kind invitation. And I must say that you're both so professional. And I'm just sitting here. It's quite rainy and windy. We have had very nice weather yesterday, and it's quite mild. But I have decided to be inside in my kitchen with the fireplace, and I have picked some flowers in the garden, and I'm looking so much forward to our chat.
You look very snuggled up in your kitchen with your fireplace.
What means snuggled?
Snuggled up. I think you've got some hygge going on.
Yes, hygge. Yes, you're right. You're right. Yes.
Now, Claus, for the few people watching or listening who don't know your garden, tell us a bit about your plot, you know, the space that you garden, how long you've been there, and when this passion for plants started.
Yes. We have lived here for 27 years now. And when we have bought the place in the mid-90s, I didn't know that I were a gardener. I have always been interested in colors, in design, but it was inside. But I have been in publishing. I'm running a publishing company, and the publishing company is 35 years old now, and I was always looking for people who could make books. And I have heard about a flower painter in the north of our country. I'm living in Jutland, and if you know a little bit about Denmark, I think you know if you're living in England. And Jutland is the mainland. If you go from Germany over the border, you're coming to Jutland. And if you go direct to the north, you are coming to Skagen. And I think many people will know Skagen because of the artists there. They are world famous. It was for about 100 years ago. But I'm living at the east coast, in the middle. I'm living in Aarhus. Aarhus is the next biggest town in Denmark. But because I was always looking for people who could make books, I have contacted Anne Just. I have heard about her garden, which I have seen in pictures, which was amazing. And I had asked her if she could maybe be interested in make a book. And so I was going to her garden. And she was living in the north of Denmark, just maybe 1.5 kilometer from the west coast. And it was, I must say, when I went there, it amazed me so much. For me, I'd never, ever seen a garden like this. And in a split second, I was interested in gardening, because when we have bought the house here, there was just a lawn. We have 4,000 square meter. It's about an acre. And this is an old, you can call it a manor house, 110 years old. And when I went to Anne, I could see that I could do something with my garden there. And I just started looking in the books, you know, it was before the internet. And then it was developing over the years. Because I'm in publishing, I was also starting to write books about my garden. Until today, I have written about 30 books about garden and flowers. And then it was just developing. And I went to England with Anne, and it was unbelievable. I'm sure, Alan, that you maybe know Hatspen Garden. Hatspen Garden were in Somerset.
Yes, exactly. Hatspen House.
Have you been there?
Penelope Hobhouse's old garden.
Yes, Penelope Hobhouse's former home, and then Lorien Center Pope took over. Have you been there?
Yeah, that's right. Yes, no, I haven't. But I know that Norrie and Sandra, when they had the garden, they colour themed it. It was an oval shaped garden, wasn't it? Yes, and they colour themed it beautifully.
It was amazing. And the story is that they came from Vancouver Island in Canada.
Yeah.
And you're right, they took over the garden from Penelope Hobhouse. And it was a beautiful place for about, I think, maybe 15 years ago. Yes. They moved back to Canada. Yeah. And very sadly, Norrie passed away for about 2 years ago. But they were amazing, and they have published a book at Conran Octopus in English called Color by Design. And because I was a publisher, I have bought the rights, and I published this in Denmark. But for me to go and see their garden, it was amazing because the use of colors and shapes, and it had meant so much to me. And then I would also like to mention Pete Odolph, who had opened my eyes for the shapes. It's also my plan to go and visit you too. One day I will come, but you're quite in the north.
Me? No, yeah. I'm in halfway up England on the right-hand side. There's the piece of land that juts out, which is East Anglia, and yes. I'm in Norfolk on the coast near a place called, it's spelt Happisburgh, but in English we say Haysborough.
Yes, but you can be sure I have looked you up at the internet also before you have invited me here, and I like your clothes and your wearings and all the things you do. So I really know about you, but I have learned so much from gardeners around. So today I have my garden, and I'm quite active on the social medias. I have also made many television programs for my garden. They have been sent in. In Scandinavia, and yes, here I am now today.
What I love when you put regular videos up walking around your garden and sort of sharing tips, but also just sharing your joy for the garden. I think that's one of the things people love is your heart and soul goes into your garden.
Thank you. I'm very pleased about that. Yes, I think it's amazing. And for me, I would say my main interest is design, but also designing with plants. But for me, it's about to create a little world. Today I think we have 15 rooms in the garden. So I would say it's quite a small garden. But of course, when you're talking about Danish gardens, it's not a small garden. But comparing to gardens in England, I also think, Alan, your gardens is quite big.
Yes, it's 32 acres.
Yes. Oh my goodness! How many gardeners do you have?
Well, we have 2 full-time gardeners, and I think we have a team that comes in 2 and 3 days a week, and there's probably 3 of those.
And Alan. The powerhouse that is Alan.
And then how so? I know that you shall ask me, but I would also like to know about you too. How old is your garden?
We began our garden we bought the house in 1973 while we were both living in London. And we didn't live here permanently until the late 1980s. When we bought the house, it was not derelict, but it hadn't been lived in for 3 years, so it's quite neglected. There was no garden at all. It had about 2.5 acres. So we were living in London at the time and only spending the weekend here. And we're about 130 miles from London, I suppose. So I would arrive on a Friday afternoon and Graham would then come up on the train and I'd meet him at the train station and back here we came. And then we came to live here permanently with the advent really of modern telecommunications. And that was probably about 1988, 89. And then we began to garden much, much more. I had an antique shop and the council that we were leasing the shop from wanted a huge amount of money in increased rent, which was untenable. So we gave it up. I started gardening in earnest at that point, and we gradually acquired more acreage until we got to the present acreage today, which is 32. And it's been a fascinating journey. And now, I mean, I feel probably a bit like you about my garden, that it is my refuge from the ever more hostile world out there. I try with all my heart, my mind, my soul, my body to make it into the most delightful place. And I think that judging from, I think you'll agree with this probably, but judging from comments, especially from visitors, because we open the garden to the public, it is the gardens that are gardened by the person who lives there.
Yes.
Have the soul. And that soul speaks to visitors when they come to your garden.
Yes, and I really love the sense of saying the garden is the gardener.
Yes.
But you have created the most amazing place. And do you take many groups and many visitors?
We have we're open 5 afternoons a week to visitors. We have garden clubs quite often come as a group. I do private guided tours on days when we're not open, which is Mondays and Tuesdays, or you can have a guided tour in the morning of the days that we open. And then, you know, we have lunch at 12 o'clock and then everybody else joins the garden and you can stay in the garden for as long as you like.
I thought that you would say we have lunch and everyone else can join. So not for the lunch.
Open a few bottles, you know.
This is amazing. But I would say my garden is not open for the public. Friends are always welcome. People I know, also you, of course. But I'm also quite private. And maybe it sounds a bit stupid, but the interest is too big because I'm also making television and things. So the gate is closed. So I don't take groups. I have a community called Claus Dalby Garden Club where you can be a member. It's not when you say a garden club, you mean a club in a certain town or thing, but you can be a member and you pay for that. And there are over 200 videos from the garden, and I'm posting a new video every month, and then you are allowed to come and see the garden once per year, and it really works for me. But also because I'm living in an area which is very, what you can say, it's intimate, and I'm sure that my neighbors will not allow me to have the open garden. But you're in the countryside.
We are in the countryside, yes, and I quite understand the way you feel about your garden. But, you know, when you have visitors, there are lots of other things that you have to include. I mean, you've got to think about the basic things.
Your garden always needs to be very tight, and I think that people think that my garden is always nice and tidy, but this is not. I have been live streaming from my garden every Sunday, but of course I can choose the corners to show. But I think it always, when you are having an open garden, you also want to show the best. So yes, I would like to ask you, and then you can ask me, do you know such a beautiful man and a beautiful garden, George Smith?
George Smith, the flower arranging chap.
Yes.
I know of him, but I don't know his garden. But I suspect that his garden is almost immaculate.
But it's not. Is it very far away from you? This is near to York. It's outside of York. and such a spectacular place. And he also have a team of gardeners. And but okay, now you can interview me.
I quite like this.
This is a conversation, and I think it's always nice to hear about and that we also know some of the same people.
Yeah, mutual friends.
Yes.
Yeah. And garden inspiration, which can be found everywhere. Now, I know you have some beautiful flowers to inspire us, Claus. We love show and tell on this podcast. So what did you bring along to show us from your garden?
Yes, I would also have loved to take you on a tour in the garden, but because of the weather, I have taken some flowers inside. And when people ask me what's my favorite flowers, I think it's so difficult to say. In April, it's the daffodils, in May is the tulips, and in the start of June, the peonies, and the mid-June is it's the roses and. But just now, in the late summer, I love the dahlias. And but what I do with the dahlias, I plant them as companion plants, because I think that sometimes if you just have dahlias, it can be, sorry to say that, but it can be a little bit like a Tivoli park. But I like to have companion plants, and I grow all my dahlias in containers, in pots. And you probably know that I'm mad about containers, and I'm also so pleased that one of my books will be published in English in March, called Containers in the Garden. And in this book, I'm talking about also the seasons, and of course also the dahlias. And I have picked some dahlias from the garden. I'm growing almost all colors. I don't know if I have maybe 150 and maybe 200 varieties. So I have many pots, because I just love to work with repetition. So when I plant in pots, I have at least 3 pots, 3 containers with the same variety. So it means I have so many dahlias. But I would like to show you some of the dahlias, and I would also like to show you some companion plants. This is a beautiful variety, I think. This is Eveline. And what I like with Eveline is that you have this hint of, do you say violet? Can you say violet? Or lilac, or lavender? Maybe a lavender it's a better word. But I think it's such a beautiful variety. For example, you can combine it with Verbena bonariensis.
Oh, yeah.
You can see here, because it has the center here. It's also a beautiful, you can also make a beautiful combination with Thalictrums. I have so many Thalictrums in the garden. I grow, for example, Thalictrum rochebrunianum, it will be quite tall, around 3 meters, and also Hewitt double, double one. But you can see here Eveline. Are you familiar with Eveline?
Yes, I am familiar with it, yeah.
Sometimes I say that I don't like if the dahlias have too many colors, but I think this is very distinctive. Can you say that, distinctive?
I think that's what you would call a very smart dahlia, and a smart combination too.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I think the great thing about Eveline as well is, on social media, a lot of people said Eveline was their first to come out. She was certainly my first dahlia to flower. And I think a lot of people found that. And she's very floriferous as well. So she's just a really good duo. You get such a long season of interest, and she combines so well with other plants.
And I call them the tulips of the late summer because of the colors. And the good thing is that when you talk about tulips, they're just flowering once, but with the dahlias, you can just pick and pick and pick. And then we have Salvia Amistad, which is also a beautiful salvia. It's I think it's maybe hardy in England.
You can't guarantee that it's hardy in England either, Claus. If it's in a very sheltered place, it could be hardy, but there's always a doubt in it.
Yes, but maybe it also has something to do with the winter wet.
Yes.
I think it's very, very often it's about the winter wet. I think Amistad it's beautiful, but also Love and Wishes. I think it's also a beautiful variety, and it's so easy to grow the salvias from cutting. And I would say that my garden is also a real plantman's garden. I remember the first time I went to England and saw the description, a real plantman's garden. It could also be a plant woman's garden. I think, what is that? What is a plant man? But I like to grow. I like to grow from seeds and from cuttings and grow a lot of plants. I also need to say that I have 2 full-time gardeners, but I always say that I am the head gardener. And when people ask us if we are digging the dahlias up, I say, of course we do that. I have so many beautiful varieties. Also, when we are talking about the Hatchman garden, for example, the orange one, David Howard, which is also a very classic variety with dark foliage. I have it from Aurea and Sandra for 20 years ago, and I think it's so great to have plants which remind you, it can be family, it can be friends and things you have been giving. And I think we all have that.
Yes, we all have it, and we all tell the tales to our friends of where these things came from. And this reminds me of my grandmother or whoever. We grow an impatiens in the garden here, and it's an annual one. And it was given to me as a seed pod by Christopher Lloyd at Great Dixter in East Sussex. And we've had it ever since. He said, just throw it on the ground. It will spread itself around, but it won't ever become a huge nuisance. And he's absolutely right. And people still love it today. And I'm always saying, well, help yourself to some seed.
I also had, Euphorbia graffiti Dixter, which is also from. Now we are a bit nerdy.
Yes.
Yeah, we get all the plant names. We always do a plant list. We are very nerdy on this podcast, Klaus.
Okay, I really like that. But I have some few more dahlias. Then I think Blue Boy. It's also a great variety, and you can see Blue Boy together with Eveline. I think it's quite interesting when we in the plant world are talking about blue flowers, because this is not a blue flower. Salvia patens is a blue flower, but I also call these dahlias for blue. You have this. This is a Blue Boy, and then you have this wonderful variety. This is Blue Bayou. And I don't know if you can call this a single flower variety because it's had this middle.
We would call that an anemone-centered variety.
Okay, yes.
Because it has that center.
Yes, but I think it's also such a great thing for the bees and for the insects. To have some of the single ones. And when we talk about single ones, this is Happy Single Juliets. And the Happy Single series, there are so many great varieties, and they are so amazing for pots because they're growing, they're quite low, and they all have dark foliage. And an interesting thing with the single dahlias is that they are always the first to flower. I don't know if you have been thinking about that.
I know what you mean. Yeah, that's quite true. I have a dahlia very similar in colouring. And it was given to me by the head gardener at Sandringham House, where Her Majesty the Queen stays in North Norfolk. And he didn't have a name for it, so I call it Sandringham Pink.
Yes.
It is a delight.
You could also call it the Queen. Yes.
Steady.
Yes. And this is quite similar to Magenta Star.
Yeah.
Magenta Star is also beautiful dahlia, but it's so hard to find it because it's the tubers are very small. But I have got some cutting from England for some years ago, and then I have grown it by cuttings, and I have tubers. I have tubers now, but I think the Happy Single series, it's also a beautiful.
Can I just tell you that Magenta Star in my garden is hardy, and I've left a tuber by my potting shed in the flower bed there for 8 years, maybe more. And I was looking at it yesterday. It grows next to a Clematis on an obelisk called Princess Kate, which is quite a pale one. And the Clematis obelisk is 7 feet tall. Magenta Star is now as tall as that. So Magenta Star is 7 feet tall in my garden this year. It's unheard of. I've never known it so big.
No, you will go to Guinness Book of Records. try to do that. And do you also grow a lot of dahlias?
Yes, we do. We grow many dahlias. And I'll tell you something that I've started to do, and that is I do like collarette dahlias, which are almost single. Again, they're wonderful for the bees and other insects. But there's a variety called Chimborazo. I don't know whether you know it at all.
No, I'm not sure.
Well, the National Collection holders of dahlias in England, that's where I got it from. It's very, very dark red outer petals. And then the filaments in the middle are brilliant sort of orangey gold. And I had this dahlia growing and I thought, I keep deadheading it and deadheading it. I'm going to leave one of these heads and grow some of the seed.
Yes.
And the seed I got from it was so interesting. They're all singles, but they range in colour from almost black through to very ordinary wishy-washy colours. Some of them, they're not all good, but there are lots of them that are. And I had one that had pink striped petals, pink and white striped petals, which I've got growing in the garden outside here today. And I mean, that again is now about 7 or 8 feet tall. It's a very tall growing dahlia, but I do like growing those singles from seed. You don't need to grow many. If you grow too many, you don't have the space to do it. But I mean, I do. And I do like the variety that you get. And I suppose if I'm honest, for every 30 plants, you might get one good one. But that doesn't matter because I'm not doing it scientifically. I'm letting the bees do my work for me. And then I'm just taking a pop shop at it, thinking this will be fun.
And what do you do if there's a variety you really like? Will you propagate it by cuttings the year after?
Yeah, exactly that. I dig the tuber up and I keep it in a pot and I start it into growth early in the greenhouse. And then as soon as it starts putting up shoots, I start taking cuttings. And I can probably get 20 or 30 cuttings from one plant,
Yes.
Because you do it.
and yes, but I think we also need to explain, if people don't do that the great thing is when you're taking cuttings in the early seasons and they start to grow, they will set tubers. And the tubers you can overwinter, and it's also that way new varieties are started. For example, especially if you go to the States, you can see the most beautiful varieties, but maybe the grower have maybe 20 tubers, and therefore it's very, very expensive. But maybe in 20 years you can get it very cheap. It's also, I think, with the dahlias, with the I2 hybrids. In the beginnings, the crossing between the herbaceous and the tree peonies, they were also so expensive. But now they are a little bit.
Yeah. But another way that you can propagate dahlias is if you buy a tuber, and if that tuber has, you wait and see the tuber starts to grow, and it has these little red eyes on the top. Yes. And if you slice with a very sharp knife, you can go between those and if you take each tuber with an eye, that will be a separate plant for you. So if you're clever.
I do the same. And I think also, do you think it's possible to make cuttings from top shoots from dahlias?
I've never tried, Klaus. No. I don't know.
But I think also when we take cuttings, we have a sharp knife and then we take a little piece of the tubers. But I have also taken sometimes just divided the tubers and plant them individually.
And sometimes the new shoots from a tuber are very easy because they actually have almost the roots starting at the top, new roots coming out of them. So if you take the shoot and you wriggle it backwards and forwards until it comes away from the tuber, you can see that it's already starting to make little roots.
Right. It's just so exciting. Propagating is so exciting. But how much space do you have for stuff like that, Klaus? Because you've got, more space than I have. I'm jealous of your acre. But, to have the space to be propagating and growing on, as well as the beautiful sort of showy parts of the garden.
I have 3 greenhouses. I have my first greenhouses were coming from Hartley Botanic. This is 30 square meters. And this is a cold house. Then I have the second one was this is a wooden greenhouse. It's my own design together with an architect. This is a warm house, and this is 40 square meters. No, this is 50 square meters. And the latest one is also a warm house, and this is 40 square meters. And if you have seen it, I call it my greenhouse studio. I have so many vases and things there. But the thing is also in all the greenhouses, we have shelves. So we can place the plants there, and it gives us around 20 square meters more. So it's fine.
You have a good amount. You're maximizing your space, Claus.
Yes.
Did you have any more plants in your vase to show and tell, or have we?
I have one more which I would like to show you. This is Lavender Perfection. And this is a so-called dinner plate. And I know that people are really amazed about very big flowers, but I think sometimes the dahlia can be too big.
Yes.
And I pinch them. And because I pinch them when they are quite small, you will have more flowers, and they will be a bit smaller. But I think this Lavender Perfection is also a beautiful dahlias. As Alan say, I also like the red ones. I like all the colors. I also have a display just with a lot of yellow dahlias together with white dahlias. In my opinion, it can be a little bit difficult to combine the yellow dahlias with other colors. Yes, you can do it with white. You can also do it with blue, but the colors are almost what you can call neon colored, because they are so bright. And but I can see when people see it, they really like them. Maybe they didn't know that they like the yellow colors. And I'm also talking very much about plants with limey foliage. I'm very interested in foliage, and so often I have been talking in my videos about the chartreuse foliage, because I think it's so important, and especially in the spring, it's lighting the whole garden up. For some years ago, I went for the first time to the garden of the old lady who passed away, Beth Chatto.
Oh, Beth Chatto.
I went to, yes, of course. How could I forget it? Beth Chatto. I went to her woodland garden and saw that she was doing the same with all the yellow-leaved shrubs. I just love to have shrubs in the garden, also in the pots. And when we are talking about Physocarpus, I think you call it ninebark.
Yeah.
With the shrubs, which is flowering on the second year's growth, I cut them down in the spring to about a half meter, because I don't want to see the flowers. I like the foliage. And when we cut them down, you will have fresh shoots. You will have bigger leaves. And I do it with the same with the yellow leaf Philadelphus, and we do it with a lot of plants in the garden.
The yellow theme that you're talking about, Claus, went through one of our favourite gardens at the Chelsea Flower Show, the M&G garden. I don't know whether you get to see it on television over in Denmark, but it's well worth a look. You can look it up on the internet. But that yellow theme ran through it. And can I just tell you my favourite shrub for yellow leaves? It's very late into growth, and it is a tree in actual fact, but it's Catalpa bignonioides Aurea, the yellow Indian bean tree. And again, if you cut it hard back, you get bigger leaves, but it just lightens the whole garden. And I think one of the things that I've noticed about the gardening public in England is that they are frightened of the colour yellow. Everybody says, well, I don't like yellow. They used to say that about orange. They've got a bit more broad-minded about orange today, but they're still saying it about yellow. So it needs people like you and people like me and people like our dear friend Thordis here to show the public that they don't need to be frightened about yellow. And if they use it with the right kind of complementary colours like blues and purples and mauves, yellow can be stonking, absolutely fabulous.
Yes, I always do when I'm holding a lot of, I don't know if you would call it lectures, but talks around. And then I always say to the ladies, because 95% of the public is ladies from 50 and up. And I say, now I don't want to talk about yellow, because I know that you don't like yellow, but I will just call it limey. Then it's much more fashionable, and people like it. And I'm also planning. I'm quite new on YouTube, but I have so many plants for the winter. I'd make so much video material. So I would also make a video just about plants with limey foliage. The problem is with the Catalpa, it's not really hardy here. It's but I would say maybe the best plant with yellow foliage because it would last for the whole season. This is Aralia sunken.
Oh yes.
Yes, and we grow it in pots. I think, and when I say pots, I mean containers, which
Yeah.
are maybe 40 to 45 centimeter in diameter. And I think I have maybe 70, 80 pots with Aralia sunken. It's so easy to overwinter it, and it's hardy, and it's really brightened it up. And I have just posted a video on YouTube where I've showed some of my Dahlia plantings, and there I'm also showing some of the plants with limey foliage. But I think that foliage is also so important in the garden.
I agree. Yeah, I do agree entirely. You know, many years ago, I was having a discussion with Christopher Lloyd, and he actually then took this subject and wrote a book about it, for, you know, a foliage gardening. You'll get flowers anyway, he said. You know, it doesn't matter. You will get flowers. But if you concentrate on not just the colors of foliage, but the shapes, I mean, the upright shapes, the flat shapes, the big leaves, small leaves, you know, all of the contrast that you get. And then if you use some bright variegated foliage, I mean, there are people that just don't like variegated foliage at all.
I always say that the variegated foliage needs to be an echo of the surrounding flowers.
Yes.
And I think a very easy, I have also, my sunken garden is a white garden. And if people say that they don't like variegated foliage, then I just show them, for example, you know, dahlias with a white edge. But I think you can also overdo it, because if you are using too much variegated foliage, it can be too much, but it can be so distinct when you have an echo of the surrounding flowers.
Exactly. Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you entirely. And I think one of the other things about foliage is, I mean, do try and choose plants that have shiny leaves, because shiny leaves always look cheerful and they're light reflecting. They just glisten. They have another life. If you have a flat, dull, like a rhododendron leaf, for instance, you don't want to look at it, do you? I mean, it's dull and it's plain and it's uninteresting. But if it's shiny and light reflecting, like a, shall we say, a laurel, I mean, that's, people can understand what a laurel is. You know, that is one of my favorite plants in the winter woodland. I mean, it's just lovely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but I think also textures are so important, because we're talking about the shapes and the growth and the thing. But I also say the textures of the leaf. For example, see a strawberry leaf. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yes, you're quite right. Yeah.
And also when you're talking about Alchemilla mollis, when you see this velvety, you know, I think that the texture it's also amazing. But for me, it's always about, when I see a plant, maybe a new plant, it's how can you put it together? For example, I'm growing, and this is, you probably know that, and this is a plant from Hatton Garden, Dicentra spectabilis gold hearts.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
Yes. And it can be quite difficult. It can be quite difficult to combine it. But I think I always, as I have said, I do it in pot, but I also do it in my borders, work very much with repetition. So I have a planting in the spring where I have many Dicentra spectabilis gold hearts. And then you have the pink heart. It's really the same as a tulip called Barcelona.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I have Queen of Nights, and then I have Recreado's violet. So it means if you have the pink Barcelona, you have the violet Recreado, you have the dark Queen of Night together with the limey foliage, and this is it's just magical. And when I'm seeing new plants, I always think about how can I put them together with other plants. And now there's a new variety with this is it will be easier to use with limey foliage, a Dicentra spectabilis with limey foliage, but white flowers. So you have
yes,
the white, and it's quite interesting. I don't remember the name.
But it is quite interesting what you just said with Spectabilis goldheart, because the gold leaves and the pink flowers, they slightly don't go together. No. But what you've done, which I think is very clever, is you've leavened it. You've eased other colours in there to take you down a tone, and then the yellow foliage comes up and brightens everything up.
But Alan, I could see that you was almost like a chef. You was tasting what I was saying. It's because if you say to a chef, should we take some walnuts? Should we take some cauliflowers? And then you just build it up. And I would say, but I think also, because you have these three colors and you have the limey foliage, there's also a new Dicentra spectabilis. I don't remember, is this Ace of Spades or something, with a little bit very dark green foliage. I don't grow it. I find it that maybe I could make some combinations, but there are also plants, of course, I don't grow.
Yes. Yeah.
And the thing is, with Dicentra spectabilis, I think we really do in the garden, we really cut so many plants down. And Dicentra spectabilis, if you cut it down, because when I would say when the flowers is on the top, you cut it down, then you will get new fresh foliage during the summer. But if you wait maybe 2 weeks longer, it will get dormant and you will not see the foliage. And I'm mainly growing the Dicentra spectabilis goldheart because of the foliage.
It is such a privilege for me to listen to you two. I love all of the parallels between you, pouring your heart and soul into your gardens. You're both on the coast, enjoying a slightly different climate to inland. You're both kings of the container. You're both great plants people. I just want to sit back and listen to you.
You're so young.
It's a real treat, though, to listen to real plant people sharing their plants and their tips. I suppose we're going to run out of time at some point, so really we should share some Flomo, which is it's a new concept. If you've never caught one of our podcasts before, we've given it a name, but it's an old feeling. So Flomo is that sort of fear of missing out you get, that FOMO you get over a flower or a plant. It is how I live my life. Seeing wonderful things on Instagram, seeing wonderful things in gardens. I mean, the Chelsea Flower Show, I needed to lay down in a darkened room after that, all the kind of Rudbeckias and things I wanted to grow. I get loads of Flomo from your garden, Claus, and certainly from this podcast. You mentioned Thalictrums earlier. You have a Thalictrum delavayi Hewitt's double, you mentioned.
Yes.
Which is absolutely beautiful. And I don't grow that, but it was very tempting when I saw it on your Instagram feed.
Yes, and when people see it, they think it's maybe a Gypsophila. And but it's so amazing. This is really what I call a showstopper. Really a thing when people see it, they will always ask about that plant. If you have guests in the garden, I think it's the same with you, Alan. You always know this week people will ask about this and this is this. And they can be very different. Maybe it can be a fern, it can be an agapanthus, it can be a rose. But I'm always so pleased when people ask about the small flowers.
Yeah.
I'm growing a plant, so many people asked about that. This is Artemisia lactiflora elfenbein, and it's such a sturdy plant, and it also fades nicely because with the white flowers and the cream flowers. I always say don't plant a white buddleia because it's not nice when it starts to fade. But I would say. If I would say one of my top 10 plants is Artemisia lactiflora elfenbein. Do you grow this, Alan?
Yes, I do. And I agree with you entirely. I mean, there's another great leavening factor. The whole family of plants that have grey leaves, grey foliage, that's another leavening factor. And it's great for lightning areas too. I mean, if you've got somewhere in full sun with well-drained soil and you've got lovely grey foliage, There's something that I grow, very old-fashioned thing. Yeah, I don't think you could grow it, Klaus. I think it would be too tender for you. But it's called, it used to be called Senecio vira. I think it's now called Senecio I can't remember.
Oh, but Senecio, they're beautiful. Also angel.
Yeah, and this has cream flowers, but it was originally used by gardeners to cover the bare stems of climbing roses. And it has this sort of scrambling habit. Very delicate grey foliage, but it shines. It's a delightful plant. People always want to know what it is.
Yes, but it was a showstopper. I think that you probably can say today they will ask about these 5, maybe 10 plants.
Exactly. Well, we have an escallonia in our garden at the moment with white flowers, an evergreen. It's got lovely shiny foliage, an evergreen escallonia called Ivy Eye, covered with butterflies in the sun. Everybody wants it.
Okay. It doesn't. I don't think I'm familiar with that. I don't think
it would be hardy in Denmark.
Sorry?
I don't think it would be hardy in Denmark.
And always, when people are talking about very Mediterranean plants, I don't know the names because I'm not interested in them. I think it's great to see Mediterranean plants in for example, when you go to the south, but it's not for me.
No.
Right plant, right place, as Beth Chatto would say.
Beth Chatto said that, yeah.
Where are you at with your Flomo, Klaus? I think from our pre-podcast chat, when I mentioned seeing things on Instagram, that you might get a little bit of inspiration.
I would also say I have said that it's inspired me so much to go to other gardens, but also be to Instagram. Yes, you had asked me about that, and I think there are some beautiful dahlias, and so many people talking about it. I think it's called apple blossom. And I think it's grown in the States, and I have seen some very few European gardeners who have it. But I think they are with the dahlias. But I think it's so difficult to say because there are so many plants you like. But some of the dahlias from the States, they are just great.
I sent Alan a photo of a dahlia from America the other day on WhatsApp, just saying, don't you hate it when they share photos of dahlias that we can't get over here? Dahlias and zinnias. There are some phenomenal zinnias that they're breeding in America.
Yes, zinnias, you're right. If you go to Erin from Floyd Flower, they have the most amazing. But I think they breed them and they grow them in tunnels. And a plant group I also really like, which is not hardy here, it's penstemon.
Yeah.
I think there's so many great penstemons. But I think it had probably something to do with the drainage because our soil is very rich, and I think it's maybe too wet in the wintertime.
Yeah, I think it is too rich. It's too rich and too wet. I think, but if you want to grow a penstemon, I'll tell you one that I really like. It's an old variety and it's called King George. Okay. And King George has quite large red flowers, but each has a white throat.
You have something with the royal family, I can hear.
There goes the cookie clock.
No, but it's always great to be recommended new varieties. I will go and Google it. And when I started, it was the Plant Finder, the big book.
Yes, yes, me too.
Yes, it's great. But there are always plants to dream about. Yes, there are so many things to dream about.
Yeah. This podcast has a lot to answer for. We bumped into somebody at the Chelsea Flower Show who said to us, I loved your podcast, but I'm writing down so many plants I want. I was at Alan's plant fair and somebody stopped me to say, I love the podcast, but my bank balance does not, because I am always buying new plants for the garden. It is lovely to hear about new things to grow. Alan, where are you at with your Flomo?
Well, my Flomo was going to be based on the Chelsea Flower Show. I have changed that in honor of our esteemed guest Klaus today because of the plant that we saw, and we discussed it quite a lot on Monday when we were at the Chelsea Flower Show, and it is an old-fashioned border plant, but it ticks boxes with what Klaus was saying about this limey, lemony, zesty feel. You know what it's going to be. It's a dwarf. It's quite dwarf, Solidago or goldenrod. And
Okay.
in the past, golden rods have had people didn't, they shunned them. They didn't like them. There are two varieties that I do like. One is a fairly tall variety called Fireworks, but the one that we saw at Chelsea is quite a low growing Solidago, and it's called L'Amour. And it has this lovely, bright, lemony, limey, zesty. It lights up and it just looks so good combined with dark purple asters like Manche, Aster fricati Manche, and all of those sort of related asters. It just, well, I suddenly saw it through new eyes. Do you ever do that, Klaus? You know, you see a plant.
Yes, but I think we also have something to do with when you're talking about single flowering plants. I think that in the beginning you want all the double ones.
Yes.
And then when you're getting, maybe you're not getting older, but when your garden interest is growing, you can also see how important it is with single flowers. Yes. When you're talking about Solidago, yes, but I also like Solidaster, which is a cross between Solidago and Aster. Yes, but there are also plants which I was maybe not looking at for years ago, and when I see it maybe in a new light and maybe in some new combinations, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also therefore it's great to go to the gardens and also to the flower shows. And you're also talking about I say Aster Munch. You say Munch. Yes. Munch. Oh, yes. But it's also it's not quite hard to hear. It's also yes, but and I can also tell you when I try to plant a plant and it will not grow, I think maybe it can be the conditions in this specific place. Then I tried again, but if it will not grow there, I don't want to grow it because for me I like to have plants which is quite easy, but maybe also in different colors. For example, Centaurea montana. It's such an easy plant, but there are so many beautiful colors. For example, Centaurea montana carnea, which is like purple, light pink, and yes. But I'm also seeing plants in a new light.
Yeah.
And
we all do.
It's great for people to follow you because, you know, Alan's very lucky. He's got a pretty mild climate. My garden is small and I'm surrounded by houses, so that affects the climate. And there are plenty of people watching all over the world who have tougher climates and can sort of see what's worked for you and use that as inspiration for their gardens. So well done. Flying the flag for a slightly more tough climate.
Yes, but comparing to Denmark, I'm in a quite mild place because we are just maybe 2 kilometers from the water. But it's still more difficult than in England. But we can grow so many plants here.
Yeah. Well, you certainly do. Everybody needs to go and watch your YouTube videos. I think it's just good for the soul taking a walk around your garden with you. It's lovely.
Thank you so much. But you know, I just started very late because it's easier for me to speak English when I'm speaking with you, because I think also speaking a language is an echo. Because when I hear you speak English, it's a bit easier for me. But if I'm talking maybe to a person from India and it's so difficult, and I know that my English is not the best. But I just try to talk it. And it's so nice for me now when I'm on YouTube. There are so many followers in the States and then write me, oh, your accent really remind me about my grandmother. She came from Denmark, she moved to here, and also from Argentina. People are writing about that. And I'm very, very pleased about that. And I hope people understand me, and I know that they understand my hello.
You have a wonderful voice, Klaus. It's been an absolute joy to listen to you talk about plants for the last hour. When we've kept you for ages, it's been a real treat. Will you perhaps come back one day in the future?
Yes, I will. Yeah, I will come every week. No, but if you invite me, maybe in the spring or in the summertime next year, I can show you a part of the garden.
Yes.
Oh, that'd be delightful.
Yeah.
I'd love that.
And Alan, I will come and meet you one day.
Yeah, wonderful. You'll be welcome.
That's a promise. Claus, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day in the garden. Don't get too rained on in the storm in Denmark. And we look forward to seeing you in the spring.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. Bye-bye.
All the best. Goodbye.
I think you're mute. Oh, there we go. There you are.
How are you?
I'm all right. You look very happy.
Hello.
Ah, there we are.
Good morning.
I'm here. This is my first Zoom. Have you got my mail?
We can see you. We can hear you.
Oh, such a pleasure.
Yeah.
But now I'm here.
There.
Oh, I'm sitting in the kitchen from I'll just so you can see my face.
After that,
Just a moment. It's a bit unprofessional, but someone is knocking on the door now.